The market does not scream when it breaks. It goes silent. In the early hours before headlines are written and before commentators are briefed, a thin market freezes. A halt appears where liquidity used to be. A rule is adjusted without ceremony. It is not called a halt. It is called orderly conditions. Silver does not trade for a few minutes. Then it trades again at a price that does not reflect the orders waiting behind the curtain. This has happened before. It happened in 1873 when credit evaporated and railroads folded into themselves. It happened in 1933 when possession was redefined by decree. It happened in 1971 when convertibility ended over a weekend. It happened in 2008 when markets were closed to save them. The silence is the signal. The silence always comes first. The British Empire learned this lesson early. It did not rise on paper. It rose on metal, on weight, on ships that carried silver across oceans and into vaults that could be touched. Silver was not a trade. It was a system. It was the medium through which the empire taxed, paid, conquered, and stabilized. India did not submit to sterling because of belief. It submitted because silver circulated where paper could not be trusted. China did not trade because of treaties. It traded because silver was acceptable in every port, every market, every dynasty. The empire did not moralize this. It exploited it. Physical silver anchored an imperial network that paper promises could not yet replace. The mechanism was simple. Control the flow of metal, and you control the flow of labor. Control the mint, and you control the tax base. When silver moved, power moved. When silver stopped, empires adjusted or collapsed. This is why Britain fought for access, why it arbitraged continents, why it understood that confidence is not a speech but a settlement. Paper was layered on top later, but only after the base was secure. When Britain debased, it did so slowly, carefully, and with alternatives already in place. When it shifted outward, exporting the cost to colonies that had no voice. This is how empires manage decline. They do not announce it, they distribute it. The United States inherited the paper, not the discipline. It inherited the reserve status without the restraint that created it. It inherited the privilege of settlement without the memory of scarcity. Silver, in the American system, became an inconvenience. Gold became ceremonial. Paper became infinite. The separation between physical assets and paper claims widened quietly, year after year, until the paper markets grew so large they no longer referenced the underlying metal except as a narrative device. Futures set prices for what could not be delivered. Derivatives multiplied claims on ounces that did not exist. This was not a failure. It was a design. A system that requires growth cannot tolerate settlement. Mainstream coverage treats this as abstraction. It prefers charts and personalities. It does not linger on the warehouse reports that show metal moving east while contracts expand west. It does not dwell on the rule changes that redefine what delivery means. It does not ask why trading halts appear most often when confidence is tested. The language is always the same: volatility, technicals, speculators, orderly markets. The disdain is mutual. Reality does not require permission. The British Empire survived its silver dependence because it respected it. When silver drained from circulation in the late 19th century, Britain shifted its center of gravity. It tightened credit. It leaned on colonies. It prepared for a world where control would be exercised through banking rather than bullion. The United States skipped this transition. It leapt from metal to myth. In 1971, the anchor was cut, not moved. Since then, the system has relied on faith enforced by access. Access to accounts, access to clearing, access to markets, confiscation without force, control without soldiers. This is not a theory, it is the operating system. Silver cannot save the United States in 2026 because the system does not want saving. It wants continuity of control. Physical settlement threatens that. A market that demands delivery exposes leverage. A population that understands weight resists abstraction. So the response is always the same. Paper supply is expanded. Position limits are adjusted. Cash settlement is encouraged. The price becomes a policy tool. This is not advice, and it is not a recommendation. It is an observation of institutional behavior repeating itself. The East watched and learned. It accumulated quietly. It built exchanges that emphasized delivery. It encouraged savings in forms that cannot be printed. It remembers what Britain once knew. Power follows settlement. The West, by contrast, perfected the art of delay. Losses are socialized. Gains are privatized. Rules change mid-trade. Freedom is reframed as stability. The shift is not announced because it does not need to be. It is already embedded in plumbing and protocol. When banking systems strain, they do not fail outward. They fail inward. Withdrawals are limited. Transfers are delayed. Definitions are revised. The account still exists, but access becomes conditional. This is how confiscation looks in a modern system. No doors are kicked in. No vaults are opened. Control is exerted through software and compliance. Silver, as a physical asset, sits outside this architecture. That is why it is tolerated as a price, but not as a settlement. That is why its market is managed, not allowed. The inevitability is not collapse in the cinematic sense. It is constriction. It is the slow replacement of ownership with permission. It is the quiet acceptance that savings are claims, not possessions. Britain navigated this by exporting the cost until it could not. The United States internalizes the cost because there is nowhere left to send it. In 2008, the answer was expansion. In the next phase, the answer is control. Accounts will still show balances, markets will still open, media will still explain, but the silence before the halt will become familiar. The feeling that something has already moved while you were watching something else will deepen. Silver will continue to exist, unchanged, indifferent. The system built on paper will continue to insist that this does not matter. History suggests otherwise. The second silence arrives inside the account, not on the screen. The numbers remain, but their meaning changes. This has precedent. In 1933, Americans woke up to discover that ownership had been redefined while they slept. In 1971, the world learned that redemption was a story, not a promise. In 2008, depositors learned that access was conditional on system stability, not personal need. Each time, the language softened the blow. Emergency, temporary, exceptional. Each time, the exception became permanent. What is unfolding now follows the same pattern, but with more precision and less visibility. Silver once saved Britain because it forced honesty. You either had it or you did not. The empire's ledgers reconciled with reality because reality could not be diluted beyond metallurgy. Today's system does not reconcile. It rolls. Losses are never settled, they are deferred. Paper claims stack on top of paper claims until the structure itself becomes the asset. In such a system, recovery is impossible because recovery would require settlement, and settlement would reveal absence. This is why trading halts proliferate. This is why rulebooks thicken. This is why price discovery is managed rather than discovered. A free price is a verdict, and verdicts are dangerous. The silver market exposes this more clearly than any other because it straddles two worlds. In one, silver is a commodity, priced, traded, hedged, and abstracted. In the other, it is metal, weighed, stored, and final. The tension between these worlds is resolved through control, not reconciliation. When demand for physical metal rises, paper supply expands. When delivery is requested, alternatives appear. Cash replaces metal. Delays replace fulfillment. This is not failure, it is policy. Britain understood that policy cannot override physics forever. When silver drained eastward and confidence thinned, it adapted by shifting its imperial model. The United States has chosen a different path. It has doubled down on abstraction. It has allowed the banking system to become the sovereign, and the sovereign to become a guarantor of leverage. Banking fragility is no longer a risk. It is a feature. A fragile system justifies intervention. Intervention justifies surveillance. Surveillance justifies control. Freedom erodes without confrontation. The East does not need to announce its strategy. It simply settles. It trades commodities for commodities. It builds reserves that do not depend on another nation's clearing system. It remembers 1873, when credit crises punished those who mistook expansion for strength. It remembers that empires fall when promises exceed capacity. The West remembers headlines. The East remembers weight. As this shift accelerates, the individual experiences it not as ideology, but as friction. Transfers take longer. Compliance questions multiply. Limits appear where none existed. These are framed as protections. They are not. They are choke points. Confiscation through control does not seize assets. It immobilizes them. It does not deny ownership. It conditions use. This is more efficient than force and far less visible. It also scales globally. Silver cannot save the United States because salvation would require admitting constraint. It would require shrinking paper markets to match physical reality. It would require accepting a lower standard of consumption in exchange for stability. No modern political system can survive that admission, so the alternative is chosen. Prices are guided, narratives are managed. Loss of purchasing power is reframed as resilience. Monetary debasement becomes policy, then habit, then background noise. Mainstream media will continue to miss this because it is not designed to see mechanisms, only outcomes. It will debate personalities while plumbing changes underneath. It will celebrate rallies while access narrows. It will reassure while options disappear. This is not malice. It is alignment. Systems defend themselves instinctively. The final risk is not market collapse, but irreversibility. Once access replaces ownership, returning to freedom requires confrontation, and confrontation is expensive. Once settlement is optional, trust becomes irrelevant. Once control is normalized, it no longer needs justification. Britain exited empire because it recognized the cost of maintaining it exceeded the benefit. The United States is discovering that maintaining control is cheaper than maintaining trust. For the individual, this resolves quietly. Savings become balances. Balances become permissions. Permissions become revocable. Not all at once, not announced. just enough friction to discourage resistance. Silver will still exist, unchanged outside the system, but increasingly irrelevant to those whose lives are conducted entirely within screens and accounts. The gap between what is owned and what can be used will widen, then be forgotten. The silence will return, not as a halt, but as acceptance. The market will open. The account will show a number. Access will feel normal until it is needed. And when it is needed, the system will already have moved on.